Okay, well, our expression of the day. In thinking about our expression for this week, I actually came across this cartoon. So, this cartoon here is a picture of a cat. And I know that we have been using some expressions in the past using animals, dogs, and cats. And now, this expression is not about the cat, but I thought it was kind of a funny looking cartoon. But anyway, our expression of the day is don't cry over spilled milk. Okay, you try that. Don't cry over spilled milk. Now, what does that mean? Well, as you can see here, basically when you spill milk, it's on the floor and you can't really do anything about that. You've made the mistake. So the expression don't cry over spilled milk basically means that don't worry about something you can't change. The milk is already on the floor, so don't cry about that. Instead, we should try to clean it up. Now, of course, when thinking about this expression, I thought here the picture of the cat would be a good example because cats, of course, love milk. So if the milk was spilled on the floor, notice the cat would say, "Don't cry over spilled milk," when you can lick it from the floor, right? If you were a cat. So of course, a cat would love for you to spill milk on the floor. But still, let's think about this expression because oftentimes, sometimes we just want to complain about something. If it's something that's already happened, sometimes we don't want to fix the problem first. We want to complain about it. So I thought that would be maybe our chat question of the day. So I hope you can see it there on the screen. So our chat question really is thinking about: do you know somebody who complains about problems all the time instead of trying to find ways to fix the problem? So what do you say to this person? Are you the kind of person who do you just listen to them complain, or do you try to help them fix the problem? So that's what I want to know. Are you the kind of person who would just listen, or do you try to help, or maybe you try to do both? So you can use your microphones or give the answer in the chat box, but tell me what you would do in this situation. Okay, so once again, our expression. Thanks everyone for answering that. Okay, so once again, our expression of the day is "Don't cry over spilled milk." So again, don't worry about things that we cannot change. All right, so let's go ahead and our topic really, and I want to see if I can present again. I've had some trouble with the Google Slides here this morning. All right, so maybe we can see it there again on the screen. So we're going to return to a topic we started talking about in the spring session, and that is word families. So let's see what we remember from from our spring session. So once again, we mentioned that word families are basically how we build words in English. We take roots or root words, okay, so again, small words, and then we build by adding parts to them. So if you remember, we mentioned that these are called affixes, these parts that we're going to use. So you say that there, affixes. Okay, so affixes are the things we put at the beginning and the ending of these roots to create new words, to create new family members. And something you will see is word families are like kind of like regular families. We have different members of families, just like everyone here has different members of their family. Now, where do these ideas come from? Well, again, English doesn't have many sort of affixes and roots from its kind of original language. So instead, over the years, as English borrowed from languages like Latin and Greek, these languages used parts. They used parts of words and to put them together. And English, excuse me, English borrowed many of these words, many of these words hundreds of years ago. And of course, English also borrowed many of these words from French, which is a Latin language too. Now, again, English had some parts. English changed words in different ways, but not like Latin and Greek. So again, this was kind of a new idea for the English language too. Now, if you remember last time, I used an example. So I'm going to use the same example here, and that is the root word form. So remember, form means like shape, okay? So if you remember, what we did is we talked about how we can build words from this root, okay? So building from this root idea. And I'm going to use my pen tool here. So we take the root form and then we add things to it. So again, for example, when we think about prefixes, okay, everyone say that word, prefixes. So prefix, pre means before. So these are the affixes that we're going to put before the words, right? So the idea is that we are using prefixes before we use the root word, before the root word itself. So in this case, prefixes go before the root. So we have the word form or the root word form, and then we add these prefixes before it. So for example, everyone, you can say this together with me. Inform, reform, uniform. So if you notice, putting all of these prefixes here together helps us create these kinds of new words. So inform, reform, uniform. These particular words, of course, can actually be the beginnings of different word families. And then from there, we can build different members of the family. So for example, Maria, you mentioned you had, brothers and sisters. Well, guess what? Word families are like real families. We have brothers, some families have one brother, two brothers. Some families have no sisters, six sisters. So the idea is word families can often build and then create more members of the family. So for example, in choosing and thinking about color, I'm going to choose a different color here. Notice how we can take inform. So follow my color here. Information. So then we can now create a member of that word family. So everyone say that, information.
Information.
Okay. All right, now the next one, if you think about reform, now reform means to change something, to make something new or to try to make it better. Well, for example, a person who likes to reform things is called a reformer. Okay. And then finally, uniform. Now you might know the word uniform from how people wear clothes at specific businesses. Police officers, for example, people working at fast food restaurants often have uniforms, right? So in this case, uniform, I can take uniform and create uniformity. Uniformity. And uniformity means like everything kind of being the same. That's why we wear uniforms, is to look the same. Everyone, men, women, in a business, for example, all look the same. So uniformity can also be a particular member of this family. Now, these endings here, ation, and ity, these are what we call suffixes. Okay, everyone, let's say that together, suffixes.
Suffixes.
Okay. So once again, we have three different ideas that we're looking at here this morning. So we have affixes. And again, affixes are both prefixes and suffixes. So again, affix is kind of like the general idea. And then prefixes are words or parts of words that go before the word. So that's why it's called a prefix. Pre means before, okay? And then suffixes are those endings we put at the end of the words. And the suffixes are especially important because suffixes tell us what kind of word it is. So that's what we're going to talk about here in just a moment. The problem is that because English borrowed all of these words, well, We borrowed so many of them. There are many prefixes and suffixes. And the biggest problem is there is no easy way to learn how to put these families together. Now, what I'm saying here is this topic is difficult for English speakers. This topic is difficult for me, as an American who speaks English. So the idea here is word families are like real families. They're very complicated. So that's kind of what we're thinking about here this morning. And it's very difficult to try to think about memorizing all of these word families, because it's very difficult, very difficult. And now some of you might have an advantage if you speak, French and Portuguese and Spanish and so on. But the truth is, it's difficult for everyone because there are so many. There are so many. All right, I'm going to clear the screen now. So guys, thanks for joining in on that particular activity. Let's go ahead and move on to the next screen. So, for example, I took two of the words from the list here, and those words are inform. Sorry, it's kind of can't seem to get rid of that. Inform. Okay, so for example, that root word inform. Most words in English, when we're building these word families, usually begin with the verb. Now, if you remember, the verb is kind of like the action word, things that we do. So, for example, when I say inform, we might say, for example, the internet informs us. So the internet gives us information, right? So in this case, using the word inform, we use it as a verb. Now, most word families in English build from the verb form of the family. So in some ways, you might think of the verb as maybe the mother or the father of the family. Okay, I don't know if you want to call it the male or the female or the mother or the father, but the idea is most of word families begin there. Oops, sorry. Yeah, so most word families begin there. Now, when we build word families, the biggest problem is to know how to build them. And this is where it becomes a problem. And I'm going to tell you honestly, I have no easy answers. There are no easy ways to think about how we build word families. So unfortunately, in many cases, we have to memorize them. So again, that's where if you speak French, you speak Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, you probably have some advantage because many of these look the same. But for example, from the verb, I can create the noun information. So everyone, you can say that, information. And there's that suffix there, ation. Okay, so that's how we start. So we start from the verb, we build the word information. Now notice I say this is a noun. A noun, of course, is a person, a place, or a thing. So in this case, information is not a person. It's a thing. It's an idea. We get information. We get information from TV, from the internet, from our friends. Okay, now as we continue through the family, we see that we can build different family members in different ways. Now, for example, I took the word inform and I created an adjective. Now, an adjective is words that we use to describe something. So, for example, one of the adjective members of the family is informative. Everyone, you say that, informative. Now, you might say, Mr. John, what does informative mean? Well, informative means something, right? Describing something that gives information. So we might say, for example, of course, let's use English class. I'll say English class is always very informative, right? Everyone agrees with that, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, I hope everyone is saying yes. Okay, so in this case, this is something that gives us information. It helps us. It's a very informative class. Now, I'll talk about the next word in just a moment. So we'll skip that for just a moment. And then notice, often when we make adverbs, okay, so adverbs are words that we use to describe how we do something, or often why we do something, or in what way. So if you notice, many times we create adverbs by building on the adjective. So if you notice, many of you might recognize the ly at the end of the word, informatively. Informatively. So everyone, you try that. Informatively.
Informative.
Now, you might say, Mr. John, am I ever going to use this word in a conversation? Maybe not. But the idea is things that are done a certain way are done informatively. Like they're done in a way that gives good information. So in this case, we build the adverb by putting ly at the end of the adjective. So in this case, this particular word is kind of using this particular part of the family is using a double suffix, ative, ative, informative, iv, right? And then ly. So in this case, this is a good example of how we usually build word families in English. Now, again, we're just trying to introduce the topic here today. I don't expect everyone to remember everything, but the idea is to notice that many things start with the verb. We start with the verb and then we build words from the verb form. So again, with nouns, for example, we can put endings like ation. Over here on the adjective, we can put ative, ative. And then for the adverb, we add an ly to the end of the adjective. Now, today our topic is going to be focusing a little bit on an example like this, which is the word informed. Everyone, you say that, informed. Okay. Now, if you notice, this word looks like the past, doesn't it? It looks like an ed that we would use in the past tense. So, for example, you might take this sentence here where it says the internet informs us. So, for example, I could say yesterday the internet. Well, let's change it. Yesterday, my friend informed me she was coming over for dinner. Now, of course, maybe you're going to be socially distanced, right? 6 feet, maybe wear masks, maybe sit outside when you're eating with your friend. But in this case, notice the ed in this situation is a verb. My friend did something. She informed me, okay? But today we're going to be talking about how to use the ed ending in a different way. Okay, so that's what we're going to be talking about here this morning. So again, I'm trying to kind of give you a big picture as to how we create these words, right? So in this case, that's what we're learning here this morning, is that word families can be very complex, can be very complicated, and so we just kind of have to learn how words work in English, okay? All right, now I'm going to show one more example, and that is uniform. But before I do that, let's look at an example of using informed in this different way. Okay, so if you look at the screen there, let's see, Mie, could you read this sentence for us? Could you turn on your microphone and read this sentence for us?
Yes. Sarah is an informed person. She likes to read the news and follow current events.
All right, thank you, Mie. So as you can see here, this is Sarah. So she's reading a book. So if you notice, the word informed is describing what kind of person she is. So notice it's an informed person. Now, why is that important? Well, because we're using the ed ending in a different way. So let's take a look at the explanation. You see, what we're learning today is we often use the ed form as an adjective to show the result of a particular action. Something happened, and this is the result. So, for example, Sarah likes to receive information from other places. Other things inform Sarah. So in this case, the result is that she is now an informed person. So in this case, we're using the ed ending as a way to describe the result of some kind of action. So in this case, to say she's an informed person means that, yes, she receives information from the news, from television, from the internet, from her friends. So she kind of knows what's happening. Okay? All right. So there's our first example. Now let's look at our next example here with uniform. Now, I did mention a few minutes ago, so I'm going to add this to our list, that uniformity is also a noun. So let's see if I can move that. Oops, sorry guys, too far. There we go. And I'll make it a little bigger. Let me see. Okay. Well, let's try this again. Sorry, guys. Okay. Okay. So with uniformity, uniformity is a noun. So I mentioned a few minutes ago that uniformity is referring to when everything is the same. So for example, in a company, we want uniformity, perhaps. We want everybody doing the same thing, okay? But in looking at the word uniform, if you'll notice, here are some things that make English kind of difficult. So for example, if you'll notice, the root word of the family would appear to be the verb uniform. But the truth is, we really don't use the word uniform as a verb very much. In fact, we use the word uniform as a noun most of the time. So again, remember, uniform is what we wear. So for example, maybe you wore a uniform at your job. Maybe you worked at a place where you needed a uniform. So in this case, uniform is a thing. It's a thing we wear. Now, if you notice, guys, the verb and the noun, look the same. Well, guess what? This happens sometimes in English, and that's where things can get really tricky. In fact, let's move over to the adjective. If you notice, the word uniform can also be an adjective. And now things get really tricky, right? English is crazy. So if I said, for example, again, maybe you've worked at a place before where you wanted everything to be the same. So you might say, for example, this is a uniform rule, or maybe a uniform policy at a company. That means basically we want everybody to follow it the same way. So in this case, the word uniform is describing, right? Describing the word rule, okay? All right, now, again, I'll get to uniformed in just a moment. But again, remember, we often build adverbs by using the adjective form. So again, here we have uniform, like we see here, and then we added the letters ly. And now we have uniformly. So again, if we think about how do I use that word, okay? So I'm going to put a sentence here. We must follow the rules uniformly, which means we all must follow the rules in the same way. So Maria, Shiho, Rena, Mie, Sergey, we all follow the rules in the same way, uniformly. So as you can see, now things get really kind of difficult. English does have lots of these kind of crazy situations. So notice I have uniform, uniform, uniform. And all three of them have a different meaning. One is a noun, something we wear. One is a verb, which we don't really use that much. So as you can guess, uniform as a verb means to make everything the same. So again, we don't really use it that much as a word. And then adjective, uniform, a uniform something, a uniform rule, a uniform policy. Okay, now let's think about the ed ending I have here, uniformed. Uniformed, in this case, is, again, an adjective. Yes, it looks like it should be the past. But the truth is, in this situation, we're describing uniformed as the result of something, okay? Now, let's look at my next screen. So I want to clear the screen for just a moment. And let's see. Okay, so let's see. Shiho, would you read the sentence for us? Would you turn on your microphone and read this for us?
Yes. Laura is working as a uniformed police officer.
Okay, thank you. So if you notice in this picture, we have Laura, and she is wearing her uniform. Now, and as some of you might know, sometimes police officers wear their uniform. Sometimes they're maybe, trying to be secret about it in a way. Maybe they're, doing some other kind of work where they don't want people to notice them. But usually police officers wear uniforms. So as a uniformed police officer, we have the same situation that we had before. We often use the ed form as an adjective to show the result of a particular action. So for example, she put on the uniform today, so now she is a uniformed officer. So in this case, a person who's wearing a uniform, we can call a uniformed official, a uniformed person, right? So again, what I'm trying to show you here this morning is that these ed words can be used a different way. They're not always going to be the simple past. We can use them as adjectives too. Now, of course, I mentioned at the beginning of this lesson that we're also going to talk about ing words. Now, some of you know ing words is like actions, right? So for example, right now I am talking, right? Talking to you. And hopefully you are listening and not sleeping, right? Right? We're all listening, not sleeping, falling asleep. Okay, good. So in this case, notice how we can use ed and ing in different ways. So over on the left side, I have painted, and over on the right side, I have painting. Okay, so let's see. Rena, would you read the painted example for us?
Okay. I like your newly painted door.
Okay, so read the bottom part too.
Someone painted it, and this is the result.
Okay, now do you guys like red as a door color? Do you think red makes a good painted door color? What colors do you guys like for the doors?
I like this color.
You like this one? Yeah, I like this red. Now, my wife and I were walking around our neighborhood, and this one person had a very ugly red color. Like it wasn't even this red. It was, something different. And we thought, what a terrible idea, right? Okay, but anyway, so notice painted is describing the word door. It's a painted door, right? That means somebody just painted it. Now, of course, we have lots of things in our house or apartment that are painted. What things? Look around your room right now. What things are painted? What do you see that's painted? What do you see?
Wall.
Walls. Yeah, the walls are painted. In my house is kind of old, so my doors are painted. Maybe your doors are not painted, right? Okay, ladies, do we paint our fingernails? Do we have painted fingernails and toenails? Anybody? Maria, do you have painted fingernails? No painted fingernails? So maybe not. Maria says yes. Okay, Maria, I don't know. We need a camera. We may have to take a picture there to prove it. Okay. Well, Maria, now that you've responded, Maria, would you read the ing example, painting? Can you read that one for us?
I have a new painting company. Our job is to paint.
Yeah, thank you. So in this case, the company, their job is to do this. It's a painting company. So in this case, it's not talking about the result of an action. For example, notice he is painting the wall, right? We could say this is a painted wall. But actually, we can use the ing to describe what kind of job or what kind of action. So for example, a painting company, well, that's what his job is. It's a painting company, okay? Now, for example, I'm a teacher. So I could say, for example, what kind of job do I have? What could I say? So if I'm a teacher, what could I say? What kind of job do I have?
Education?
Well, that's true. That's true, Saba. But I was thinking, think about the word teach. So I think Shiho has answered it for us.
Okay.
Teaching.
Yeah,
Teaching.
I have a teaching job. So in this case, my job, my profession is teaching. So it's a teaching position, a teaching job, right? Now I know Maria, Maria likes to work in the garden, right? Maria, I see your pictures there. So you like planting flowers, right? Okay, so can we say that you're a gardening person? Are you a gardening person?
Yes.
Okay, so everybody, if you have any questions about flowers, Maria can help you, right? Okay, so a teaching job, a gardening person, yeah. So maybe some other activities we can think about, you know. But again, the idea is we can use the ing as also a way to describe something. Okay, so I wanted to take a moment and show you this because in just a moment we're going to do a couple of activities. Now, of course, the truth is we use the ed and ing in these ways, but honestly, guys, I think most of you are familiar with the ed and ing adjectives when we talk about this topic, and that is thinking about feelings, okay? So now, before we finish, though, with the word paint, so let me clear the screen here. Sorry, guys. Okay, let me clear the screen. Okay, before we leave the word paint, so since we talked about paint, I was curious maybe if you guys can help me. Now, again, the root word is paint, right? That's the main word of this family, and then we build new words. So, for example, guys, you can help me with this next one. What do we call a person who paints, like a job or a professional?
Painter.
Sergey,
Painter.
congratulations. Yes, a painter. Now, you might say, wait a minute, is a painter like an artist? Or, for example, can a painter be somebody who paints houses? And the answer is they're both painters. Now, usually when we talk about painter, we think about artist, right? But the truth is, yeah, anybody who paints can be a painter. Okay, now let's think about museums. What do we call those things that we see in a museum using paint? What do we call those when we go to the museum and we look at these things?
Painting.
A painting. Very good.
Mhm.
Now, can you see the problem here in English? We've got ing as a noun, a painting. We've got ing as an adjective. We can use ing as an action, right? I'm painting. Now, hopefully you're not painting at the moment, right? But the idea is English has lots of these situations where we use the same form, ing, in different ways, okay? Now, just before we leave the word paint, once again, look at the word family here. So we have a painting, like in a museum, right? That's a noun. We have a person who paints, painter. The verb, that's the root of the family. So the root of the family here, we'll put that again, that's the root, is a verb, paint, okay? Now notice the adjective. The problem here is paint does not actually have a real adjective. So instead, we have these examples, painted and painting. Now you say, Mr. John, aren't these adjectives? These are adjectives, right? Yes, but they're not kind of original. They're not part of the family. We had to create these adjectives using the ed and ing form. So you will notice that because this particular family has no real adjective, that means that we also have no adverb. We don't normally put ly at the ends of eds or ings. We don't say paintedly or paintingly. We normally don't say that. So in this case, this family has no adverb. So again, what I want you to think about here this morning is that word families are like real families. Real families are often very different from each other. Some families have everybody, brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles. Some families only have a few people. Well, guess what? Word families are the same. They sometimes don't have every member of the family. So in this case, like with adjective, we kind of had to, marry and add different members to this family because there is no adjective for the word paint. So we had to create painted and painting. Okay, now, again, our time's getting short. So what I'd like to do is go ahead and talk a little bit about what you're going to do this week. And this week, we're going to think about, well, the most common way we use ing and ed endings are used to describe feelings. Feelings. Now, I think everybody here probably knows what I'm talking about. So what I'd like to do is I'm gonna switch for just a moment to, I'm gonna exit this for just a moment, and I'm going to go ahead and bring up our Burlington English lesson. So for this week, you guys are going to do some activities, and one of the activities is going to be using adjectives with the ed and ing ending. Okay, now if you look on the screen, the first thing you notice are two people talking to each other, right? Do you see those two people there? All right, so Sergey, can you read the person on the left there? Can you read what is she saying?
I'm annoyed. My pizza is cold.
Yeah, nobody likes cold pizza, right? Okay,
Yeah.
and then Saba, how about on the right? Can you read her response?
How annoying.
Yeah, don't you feel that way?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh,
Now, the question is, what's the difference in meaning between these two words? Why does she use ed, and then why does she use ing? Well, that's because the ed is describing her feeling. She feels annoyed. But when we use the ing ending, that is describing the situation. Okay, so what I'd like to finish with here this morning, and again, we're going to do some more practice with this next week. So I'm going to pull up the presentation here. So as you can see, hopefully on the screen, so hopefully you can see that, we use adjectives with ed to describe someone's feelings. Okay, so everybody, you can practice this at home right now. I am confused. She is annoyed. Now, think about feelings, right? So, for example, what are some other ed words that we use with feelings? You can use your microphone or you can use the chat box. What are some other words we use with ed to describe our feelings? So we have confused, annoyed. Anybody have another example?
Exciting.
Okay, now do you mean exciting or excited?
Excited.
Yeah, there we go. So
I am embarrassed.
oh no!
I am exhausted.
Those are two bad combinations. Yeah, and it's only 11 o'clock in the morning, right? Okay, so we have excited, embarrassed, exhausted. Okay, good. Okay, now let's look at the bottom. Okay, Saba mentions bored. Okay, that's good. All right, now look at the next example. It says use adjectives with ing to describe someone or something that causes a feeling. So, for example, the recipe is confusing. Her little brother is annoying. Maybe you felt the same way about your little brother or sister. So think about excited, for example. So if I said, for example, this movie is exciting. Now I'm describing the movie. So I am excited about the movie. The movie is exciting. If maybe you fell down while you're walking in public, you might say, what an embarrassing situation. Yeah, it's embarrassing, right? When we fall down sometimes in public. Maybe you might say, oh, this is a good one. This pandemic is exhausting. Maybe you feel the same way. I feel the same way. So in this case, we can use the ing endings. Okay? So guys, what I'd like for you to do for next time is, so I'm going to erase the screen here. So for next time, and again, we're going to pick up here in our next class, but then for next time, I want you to do 2 activities in Burlington English. And again, I will send these to you in your email. I would like for you to do exercise 5, which is the watch and speak activity. And again, since our lesson is talking about health, this particular activity is talking about going to the doctor and getting a physical. Okay, so a physical, of course, is something we should do at least once a year to help us make sure we're healthy. And then activity 6 is the grammar idea we talked about this morning, and that is how we use ed and ing adjectives. Now, again, I will send this information to you in your email, but basically, I would like for you to work on these two activities before next week. Because again, next week, we're going to continue talking about these adjective ideas and maybe talk a little bit more about word families too. I don't want to give too much information about word families right now, but this is a good way for us to start thinking about them.